Today is Sunday, December 21st, 2025. It's been less than 24 hours since I recorded an episode. This isn't a real episode. Instead, I realized that I had not included two videos and some social media content that have played a role in my surrogacy journey. They are as follows. Number one, the video I recorded for my simple surrogacy profile. Originally, I took the video I made for my egg donor profile and added an intro explaining that any references to egg donor should be replaced with surrogate, since I was simply reusing the same video. But then I decided to re-record the whole thing. Watching it back now, I really don't like it anymore. It feels very scripted and fake, and the changing of my clothes for each segment is a little ridiculous. Anyway, I prefer real unscripted videos and would probably do it completely differently now. But it's what got me selected by my surrogate, so I thought it made sense to share it. It's a standalone self-contained video, so it starts with what looks like the start of an intended parent monologue episode, so don't be confused. You just saw the intro photo of me for this episode, and we'll see something similar within this video. Number two, the second isn't actually a video. It's just two photos that Simple Surrogacy used for social media advertising once I agreed to participate. And number three, this last is a pretty cool video I made for Gays with Kids at the request of Brian Rosenberg. I wrote the script and recorded it, and then they did their magic to turn it into a real advertisement. I think it came out pretty cool. Pro bono, of course. I owe them the world for all of their help. That's it. Enjoy. Hi, and thanks for watching this. I did one of these last fall when matching with an egg donor and was going to reuse that, but decided I'd re-record this and make it shorter and sweeter. I thought this would be easier given that I make videos all the time for my real estate business and my acting auditions. So I have a whole home studio set up, but it's a little different when you're talking about yourself and hoping for a match. What do I say? How do I say it? And what will ring true and create an emotional connection that will make this woman choose me. So here's a little bit about my background and how I got to where I am and why I'm starting a family at this point in my life. I grew up in Massachusetts, about 9 miles west of Boston. My parents divorced when I was 8. My 3 sisters and I left with my mom, who remarried a few years later. But we got tired of moving every year and ultimately left her to be in a more stable environment with my dad. I'm the first and only one of my family to go to college. Unfortunately, my sisters weren't encouraged to take the path that I was going down because my parents viewed women in very traditional ways. They all went to a high school that was 85% girls, preparing to become secretaries. And this was in the late 1970s, not the 1950s. I was supposed to be an architect because that's what Mike Brady did, and I was fascinated by this as a 12-year-old. But I learned that loving architecture and becoming an architect are two very different things. So my first 3 months of college were a bit rocky. I couldn't figuratively and literally afford to have a C+ GPA, which was the average for architecture students. So I transferred to the School of Computer Science and got straight A's from that point on, which meant I continued to get scholarships and could finish my degree. Having the financial means to do what I want in life has always been a driving force, given my parents' financial struggles all of their lives. I remember being in the computer club in junior high and not really understanding it, but ultimately found it a fascinating thing to study and applicable to any industry on the planet, which means lots of opportunities for me after graduating. My sisters are all still in Massachusetts. My dad passed away 18 years ago, and we just spent most of 2023 getting my mother into a nursing home, a very long and challenging process that took a lot of sibling teamwork. After graduating Syracuse, I took a job on Wall Street, which was the most exciting thing in the world. I tend to follow my gut when it comes to making life-changing decisions. But New York City is a tough place to work and live, and I decided 3 years into it that achieving the American dream would be much easier somewhere else. Instead, I let JP Morgan pay for my MBA in finance at New York University for another 4 years. And only then did I decide to move south after my attempts to move to San Francisco didn't pan out. I wasn't comfortable buying a home on an earthquake fault line anyway. I did end up going back to California for my honeymoon in 2011 and driving up the Pacific Coast Highway in a convertible, which was wonderful, from San Diego to Los Angeles, all the way up to San Francisco. Anyway, I was a bit wary of leaving the Northeast since my family was just a 2-hour drive away, but I had friends in Atlanta, and after just one visit, I was sold. It was warm, extremely sunny, the cost of living was lower, the people were friendly, and I got the same salary I had in New York City, which went a lot farther. I found that realizing your life's goals is much easier in the South, and I really, really, really love it here, even after 29 years. It's made me a much more friendly, outgoing person because it's totally acceptable here to wave to strangers and strike up conversations with them, which I never did in the Northeast. I was pretty shy as a kid, so maybe that's part of the reason. Now I'm quite the opposite in that nothing really scares me, including being on stage with thousands of people looking at me. I was in a Target Frugalista fashion show in 2009, and the energy of 5,000 people in the audience was exhilarating. I've had corporate jobs all my life doing project, program, and portfolio management for financial institutions, primarily banks. I did consulting work for 7 years as well, but the traveling and living in other cities Monday through Friday got old. I took a 6-month partially paid sabbatical in 2001, and then 9/11 happened, and I spent 6 months glued to the TV wondering if I should go up there and help. I got a dog instead. I got laid off 2 years later, took 3 years off, a taste of retirement in my 40s, which was wonderful. For the first time as an adult, life slowed down so abruptly that I had time to reflect on everything and figure out whether I wanted to continue this lifestyle for another 25 years. I tell everyone that you should want to get laid off because it will teach you so much and make you so resilient when you survive it. And then I moved to Minneapolis to work for Target for 4 years without selling my house in Atlanta. I met my husband there and we ultimately moved back to Atlanta. We married on Cape Cod in 2010 and that lasted 10 years, but we ultimately separated during the pandemic, which was probably the best thing for both of us. The divorce was final in 2022 and the financial dust settled a year later. Which brings me to fatherhood. I've always wanted to be a dad, but my career and search for Mr. Right got in the way. It's that typical life path everyone is pushed to. Get a good education, get a good job, find your soulmate, settle down, and then start a family. He was never fully on board, and I learned that you can't and shouldn't convince someone who doesn't really want to be a parent. I also learned that I could not do this without my spouse agreeing to it. I kept telling him that there would be a million things we'd never experience if we didn't have kids, like Little League and prom and graduations and weddings and grandkids. But he didn't care enough about any of that. Anyway, now that I have the freedom, resources, and time, I'm finally pursuing this lifelong dream. Yes, my life is a series of somewhat unordered things, I guess, but where there's a will, there's a way. I'm without a pet right now, but have had 3 whippets. The first 2 were retired show dogs. They look like greyhounds, but are smaller. If you see a tiny one, it's an Italian greyhound. Whippets are the medium-sized ones. We did get a puppy in 2018, but he technically belonged to my husband, so he left with him. I miss him dearly, but do get to babysit him a few times a year. And he now has a brother who is super affectionate. I love having a dog, including the unconditional love and responsibility that comes with it, but I probably won't get another one until the kids are at least 5. My ex and I are cordial, but don't really hang out as friends. The divorce wasn't as terrible as everyone leads to believe. It's not necessarily the worst thing in the world that can happen to you and may actually have a silver lining. But the financial hit I took felt very unwarranted, and he took advantage of the legal position that everything is split 50-50, whether he paid for any of it or not. Luckily, we reached an agreement through mediation, and now he's hired me 4 times as his real estate agent, so it's primarily a business relationship. I honestly think we'll be tied together in some capacity for the rest of our lives. He has already hinted at being next in line in my estate plan if I were to die before my children turn 18. I left the corporate world 7 years ago after my second layoff, but this time I got my real estate license immediately and have been doing that ever since. It's something I always thought about doing and didn't want to wait until I was retired to explore it. It's a job that utilizes a much wider set of skills than any of my corporate jobs ever did. I have much more control over my time and schedule, and it gets me closer to architecture in the sense that I'm constantly looking at homes. I stage the condos I sell and get to use my good eye for design when preparing homes related marketing material and all of my social media. In my free time, I do all kinds of things, although the pandemic turned me into a homebody who now really appreciates the simpler life of staying in and enjoying time there. I love cultural events and movies and reading good books. These days, I much prefer a small gathering with people than being in a crowd of thousands at a concert. I also love really different and unique things because I'm constantly experimenting with new adventures. The most interesting hobby I have now is acting because Atlanta has become a new mecca for the entertainment industry. I randomly fell into this in 2019 and have since worked on 275 projects, mostly background roles in TV and films. But in the last few years, I've landed speaking roles in commercials, independent films, and industrial projects. I remember wanting to be an actor as a little kid, but it's one of those unrealistic, short-lived dreams that never materializes. It's hard work and doesn't pay well, and you really have to love the craft to devote your life to it. It is very ironic that this opportunity landed in my lap just because I moved to Georgia and the industry moved here as well. My first job was on Ozark, and I honestly felt like I was on a different planet. I even had a podcast for 3 years about background acting called The Background Scoop to help other newcomers learn the ropes. I think it's my calling to help others by educating them through my own life experiences, whether that's about real estate, acting, divorce, or having a child through surrogacy. I now create monthly videos on YouTube called Intended Parent Monologues, which started as something I wanted my children to watch one day to see what their dad went through to bring them into this world. But of course, they're also to help intended fathers understand what the process feels like. At this year's Men Having Babies conference in Atlanta, I had people coming up to me to talk after listening to the great questions I asked the panels. I hope to be invited to speak at this in 2026. Almost forgot, I uploaded photos of me and my egg donor to ChatGPT and asked it to show me what my kids will look like at ages 5, 10, 15, and 20. Here they are. That's one great use of AI, right? So that's a little bit about me. Hopefully this has given you some insight into who I am and why I'm here doing this. And if we're a match, that would be wonderful. And I look forward to going on this journey together. And thank you for being a simple surrogacy surrogate. Your generosity is deeply valued and appreciated by people like me. Thanks again for listening to my story. I first heard of the Gays with Kids Academy 2 years ago when I was just starting to think about my journey. I attended a lot of their webinars and explored their website to get more information. It was a lot in bits and pieces that wasn't quite gelling in my head. So it wasn't until I enrolled in the GWK Academy last year that all the pieces started to come together. This is the most valuable resource I've come across in my journey. Individual self-contained modules you can watch at your own pace and rewatch as needed to refresh your memory until you feel absolutely comfortable that you understand the process. By the start of last year, when I began interviewing partners, I had a solid understanding that enabled me to ask the right questions. Not, what exactly do you do? But things like, what's the all-in cost for an egg donor and how does that break down between agency costs and donor expenses? And to the clinics, what's the medical cost for the screening versus the IVF cycle itself? And to the surrogacy agencies, can I match with a surrogate now or do I have to wait until I have embryos? Now that I have 4 euploids, which is a fancy word for chromosomally normal embryos, I know I'm good to go. I think I'd be totally lost without the GWK Academy, or at least still drowning in the complexity of it all. But thanks to them, they made it simpler, clearer, and easier to understand. And isn't that what every intended parent wants? Someone to guide you, someone who knows it like the back of their hand, someone generous enough to share with you what they know. Because the more you know and the more you understand before you officially start, the easier and less stressful the whole journey will be. And a happy and successful journey to parenthood is definitely what I want. So thanks, GWK Academy. I couldn't have done it without you.